Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix Book Review. I'm Liz Booker. My guest today is a former teacher and the author of 9 nonfiction books for young readers, including The Secret Life of Math, which won Forward Magazine's Gold Book of the Year, Eat Your Science Homework, Recipes for Inquiring Minds, Women Heroes of the U.S. Army, Remarkable Heroes from the American Revolution to Today, Thrill Seekers, 15 Remarkable Women in Extreme Sports, and her most recent book, High Flyers, 15 Inspiring Women Aviators and Astronauts, which launched on July 19th, 2022. You can find her at her website, AnneMcCallumBooks.com, on Instagram at AnneMSBooks, on Twitter at McCallum Books, and on Facebook at author Anne McCallum Staats. Anne McCallum Staats, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Super excited.
I am too. I'm so excited about this book. I really enjoyed reading it and about all the women that you highlighted in it. Can you give us an overview of High Flyers? And I should have asked before, but do you want to do a reading?
Oh, sure. So first of all, High Flyers is basically, as it says, 15 women aviators and astronauts. So it's actually organized by altitude. So I start with, bush pilots and helicopter pilots and one hot air balloonist. And then I go up into commercial and jet pilots, and then I have astronauts. So it's really, it's based on interviews. It's based on, in-depth research. And the idea was really to kind of get the story behind the story. And oh my gosh, a reading. Well, let me read Tammy Duckworth, because that's just an amazing story. I'll just read the first page of the Tammy Duckworth chapter. So it's called Pilot Turned Politician. Many people who are severely wounded have their initial fears of life destroyed, replaced by the understanding that they can do just about anything. An assistant secretary in the Department of Veteran Affairs, Latta Tammy Duckworth, was at the Washington Convention Center on May 18, 2009, to participate in a ceremony held by the U.S. Postal Service. She was not yet a U.S. Senator. That would come later. The purpose of the day's event was to commemorate the reissue of the Purple Heart stamp, a tribute to the recipients of this prestigious award. Tammy was speaking from experience and her own heart. She had earned this medal after sustaining unthinkable injuries that nearly killed her. And I'll stop right there.
Yeah, her story is incredible. Obviously, because she went through so much hardship, but has come out so strong from it. But all of the stories in the book are so fabulous. And I was so excited sort of about the diversity of background and the diversity of the women themselves that you highlighted in the book. And you have all of these other great science books. How did you get into writing for young people?
Well, what a great question. So the thing is, I never thought I could be an author, and it was just, pie in the sky. And really, it kind of started when I started out writing these books about math. And I was a math teacher, and all of these parents kept telling me, I hate math, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, like when I was a kid, I was really super disinterested in math too. I just thought, and I didn't really have good training or teachers in math. And so I decided that a book was kind of a fun way to get people to understand, this topic that wasn't super interesting to many, many people. And actually, the first idea I had was to pair food with math. And so it wasn't my first book. It took me a couple books to get there, but that was my first idea. So anyways, it was just, I think the thing about me is I'm just super curious about things. And I feel like adults sometimes have lost that curiosity for everyday things. And so I love to connect with young people and get them, looking at things in interesting ways, or looking at things that they might not necessarily focus on. So all that to say, yeah, it was kind of a path that went like this though, So
That's so great. Mentioning your lack of interest in math and sort of trying to bring together art and writing and,
mhm.
the hard science of math. You made me think of the book X plus Y, A Mathematician's Manifesto for Rethinking Gender by
Oh,
Eugenia Chang. Are you familiar with this book?
I'm not, but I want to write that down.
Yeah, so
Yeah, no,
I've
that's a
mentioned
good
it
one.
before on my discussions because she really kind of makes a case for how statistically insignificant most of the cases that quote unquote prove the gender differences are, but when you hear her talk about like her core mission, it is
Mhm.
to make math exciting and interesting to young people by accessing it, by teaching it in different ways. And so I think she
Nice.
teaches this art program that brings math in. So anyway, check Eugenia
Very
Chang
cool.
out. It's a very cool book. Now, so you have all of these topics that you've written about. You've written about the women Army soldiers, and you've written about these extreme sports ladies. What brought you to women in aviation?
Oh my gosh. Well, so this is my ninth book, and honestly, I had written the first one in the series, which is called Thrill Seekers: 15 Remarkable Women in Extreme Sports. And so I was actually flying in an airplane, and it happened to have a female pilot, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool because 9 times out of 10, you just don't see a female at the controls, unfortunately. I think those statistics are getting better, but they still have a long way to go. But anyway, I was just so fascinated by her. And I thought, gosh darn, I'm just going to go talk to her. So I spoke with her for a couple minutes, while I was just, getting on board or whatever. And I said, I really have to write a book about you because it's just, what you're doing is just so amazing. And hats off to you. And we kind of went our separate ways, and I didn't keep in contact with her, and I actually forgot what her name was, and whatever. But the seed had really taken root, and I thought this is a really interesting topic for me to write about next. And so that was kind of where it started. And then I put together a proposal to fit into this series, and and was able and honored to write such a interesting book.
Well, so how did you go about finding the 15 women that you did highlight? And like, how did you make the decision about who was going to be included?
Oh, that's a hard part because of course, you go online and some are very famous, and I had heard about them at least, and their names pop up if you Google women aviators or astronauts or whatever, and then others, you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. And because I didn't really want to focus on just people that are household names necessarily. I wanted to include those people, but I also wanted to include some of the unsung heroes. And so just like a lot of digging. And well, first of all, I organize, how I want the book to be. So I'm looking for people, in that lower airspace. And then I'm looking for people, a little bit higher up. And I just came across people online. We're so lucky to live in this age where you can just do so much research online. I think one of the first women that I came across was Edgora McCallum, and she was actually the first female pilot, or sorry, hot air balloon pilot in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates. And that's cool. I actually used to live there, and I know how very much genders are segregated. Separate train cars, separate seating, and so this was really a big deal. So yeah, I just started making a list of all those high flyers, and then I reached out to them, and sometimes they got right back to me, and sometimes it took a while. But for the most part, people were super enthusiastic. So it was just really cool. It was a fun project.
Well, I love what you said about how lucky we are to live in a time when we can not only um, find stories about women online and learn about them, but also contact them through social media and stuff like that. Because that, like, the ladies from my generation and before in aviation, we talk a lot about the fact that we were most often assigned or working in a place where we were very isolated. And we didn't have access to other role models or mentors, or even just to see what other women were doing in aviation. So yes, we are very fortunate, and the young women in this world are very fortunate to see those and have access to those too. And one of the things that I want to say that I love in here is that at the end of every chapter, you highlight where readers can find that person in the ether. And every one of them has something. They either have a website or they're on Instagram, and you list all that stuff in there, which is so relevant and so great for people to learn more and actually see the faces of the people that you've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I want to make them real, you know?
Yeah, so well, they're real. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of which, let's, there were 15 of them, and it would probably take us hours to talk about them in depth. But I do want to highlight each one very briefly so that readers kind of know and listeners know who's highlighted in this book, what kind of inspiring stories they're going to read about if they buy the book. So why don't we start at the low altitude and just go through it?
Okay.
I'll let you start.
I'll open up to my table of contents here. So yeah, I mean, just, these are just so near and dear to my heart. But the first one is Brooke Roman, and she actually flies a small plane in Alaska. She was once given the opportunity to fly drones for the military for this astronomical salary, said no. I love Alaska. I love, flying a pontoon plane onto some remote lake. This is where my love is, and this is what I'm going to do. Next is Tammy Duckworth, and we talked a little bit about her, but, she is just so incredible because one of the things, and by the way, I was able to interview her. It was, I tell people it was a 5-minute interview because, of course she's a senator, and so not tons of time, but she said that one of her claims to fame or the reason that she's achieved this amazing success is really that her superpower is hard work. And she just, she'll just put her head down and she'll just work. And if something seems insurmountable, she'll just break it down. She talks about, she came from a childhood of poverty. And so, really, really intense, difficult times. And she said that one of the things that she was never very good at was running. And of course, when she was in the military, you have to run. And she said what she would do is she would look to that next tree and say, okay, I can make it to that next tree. And once I get to the next tree, then, I'll go from there. But it was just these incremental step-by-step process that got her to where she was.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, for anyone who doesn't know her story, the thing that happened to her in that accident when her aircraft was shot down was that she lost both her legs. So she's a double amputee and she's a mom. And I want to mention too that she has her own memoir, which is called Life is a Gift.
Yeah. No, and just fascinating. And the other thing I was going to say about her too is that when she first went into the military, all of the men had been training to go overseas and to, actually fight in combat. And at that time, women weren't allowed to. And she was like, no, I shouldn't get the same pay. And I don't want to sit on the sidelines. I trained for this. I want to do something significant and I want to contribute. And so what she did was she went into aviation because she found out that you could fly a Black Hawk helicopter in combat because it was considered more like a support vehicle. And so it was just horrendous, but also ironic that, she was shot down and she was literally in combat. And honestly, in my research, so many women, even though there were these rules, so many women were doing dangerous things and it's just not, you can't just make these rules because it blurs sometimes. And there's so many women heroes out there. So
these were part of the arguments, promoting the removal of the combat exclusion policy too. So yeah.
Yeah. But Edgora McCallum, I talked a little bit about her before, grew up in Uzbekistan, went to the United Arab Emirates because she had relatives there, and just, had this passion and didn't let, these gender restrictions or whatever stop her. She trained and she became a hot air balloonist. And she loves it. It's peaceful. It's like her raison to être or whatever. D.G. Morawski, so the chapter is called Horseback to Medevac. And she was also someone who loved the idea of being a pilot. And she didn't come to it initially until a friend's dad had an ultralight and said to her one day when she was a young girl, he said, "Hey, come for an ultralight flight." She did, and she saw that bird's eye view of the world, and she just, it just took root in her heart that she wanted to do that no matter what. She did actually fly Kiowa Warrior in Afghanistan. She came back, and now she's a medevac pilot. Sleeps with her boots on because you never know when you're going to get called. Yeah, Anne McDonald, also an officer. She actually is really cool because she was in the first class of West Point women. So that first, 1980, yep. she applied, and she got a call from the governor. And the governor said, congratulations, you're going to be in this first class. And it was tough because, as you can imagine, anytime there's such a radical change, decades and decades of only a male institution, but she and the rest of her, the ones that graduated were able to do so and go on to just incredible things. So part 2 is the next altitude, and this is commercial pilots, jet pilots, Coast Guard pilots. We have Tammy Jo Schultz, who a lot of people have heard of because she was that hero pilot who helped to co-pilot Southwest 1380 when there was this catastrophic engine failure. And in fact, one whole side of the airplane was defunct.
Before you go on, was she the co-pilot? Yep. I thought she was the pilot in command. No?
She was the pilot in command, but there was a co-pilot. So there were two of them.
Yeah. Just want to be clear that she was the captain of that flight.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I could talk a lot about her too, because she was a jet pilot.
Yeah.
She, practiced. She was one of those people who flew a jet onto an aircraft carrier, and just amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine. Her story is told in her memoir, Nerves of Steel, which is excellent. And there's an adult version of that book, and there's also a young adult version of that book for younger readers. Yeah. No, for sure. And she actually is a lovely person too. And when I spoke to her, and she said, that moment. A lot of times people focus on that particular incident, and there's so much more to her. But she did say that moment, she felt like another airplane had smashed into them. That's what she thought. And she thought, this is it. I'm ready to go to my maker. That's it. The one thing that still gives me chills every time I say it out loud is that she made one call into the cabin. And she said, "We're not going down, we're going to Philly." And, just that, oh my gosh, it just sends chills. Like, it's just amazing.
She gave everybody hope. Yeah.
She did. And one person was tragically killed during that incident. And, but, she saved everybody else. She saved everybody else and landed safely. So, she was incredible. Katie Higgins Cook, first Blue Angels pilot. She flew that fun Fat Albert plane. And but just to again, like, break into that all male elite team. She was part of that elite team. So that was super cool.
Yeah, so
Olga,
she was flying the C-130 for the demonstration team, but we now have our first jet pilot who was recently announced.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
what's her name? It's Lieutenant Amanda Lee. So I'm excited to see her.
Yeah, no, good. Actually, absolutely. So Olga Custodio, she's actually another one who just, was told no from the get-go. And, she actually went right after high school to enlist, and she took the entrance exam, and she came back to see how she'd done. They said, "Oh, no, you didn't pass." Well, she found out years later that actually she had passed and she had done very, very well. But she kind of set her dream aside. She always wanted to be an Air Force pilot. She set that aside for the longest time. And then literally years later, she was at this open house, and there was this table for the Air Force, and they were advertising. They were saying, "Hey, we want women." And Olga was like, "This is my moment." And so she went out, she filled out an application. And when it said what career or what job did she want, she put pilot, pilot, pilot. And she was able to do that. She became an instructor, and was flying those incredible jets, and fantastic. And then she actually, when she retired, she went into she flew for American Airlines, first Latina female pilot hired by that company. And again, this is a recent history, so it just tells us how long it took us to get to these places.
And her story is also told in the book Latinas in Aviation by Jacqueline Ruiz. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for interjecting all these books.
This is my jam. Like, I just promote all these books, and I want to make sure that awesome. While we have an adult audience who might buy the book for young people, they might want to read more about these ladies themselves. So I just want to make sure they know where to find them.
Yeah, no, thank you for sure. So next one is Kimberly Scott Ford. Again, just a lovely person, so humble and, kind and wonderful to speak with. She always, again, had this idea. She actually went to a Blue Angels demonstration, and that was the thing that kind of sparked her. But then she was always like interested in planes, and she would, even at the airport, she would be watching the planes go up and down and saying, "Hey, I want to do that. I want to do that." Wasn't easy. She did end up graduating from the Air Force, ended up doing that for a while. And she became a pilot for Alaska Airlines. And again, the first African-American female in that company. So again, slowly but slowly, these doors are opening, but it takes time, and it's, they're not super wide open even now.
Kimberly is one of the people in our community that many, many people hope will write a book. I want all of these women to write their book, but I hear repeatedly my friends say, "Oh, I hope Kimberly will write her book." So hopefully we'll get to her.
I hope so too. She's just got so many great stories.
Yeah.
And excuse me, the perseverance of just getting to where she is.
Yeah.
The next one is Renaquarussell, and she's another one. She is from the Coast Guard. She actually flies for the Coast Guard currently.
Go Coast Guard! Yes, we're huge fans of Ronnie. Yep.
I know, she's lovely. She actually had an uncle who was a Tuskegee Airman, and Renaka won this very prestigious award. It's called the Air Medal. And she was, her and her co-pilot were up in the air first during a hurricane. And,
Harvey.
Hurricane
Harvey. Yep.
And again, like, no thought to personal safety, just, I gotta go out there. I gotta contribute. I gotta save others. I gotta, do my part. And just that selfless service, again, is just so heartwarming and encouraging.
So, you
So
know,
she's awesome.
what I saw the other day is that was a picture of her. So Ronnie is from the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And she recently accepted the keys to the U.S. Virgin Islands to honor her for
Nice.
her achievements. Yeah, I was so excited to see that. It's great for her and great
Yeah,
for the Coast Guard.
absolutely. Absolutely. And for the Virgin Islands.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
of course. Yeah.
one more little aside about her is that so the way she got into flying was that she, being from the islands, often they took these little hopper planes from one to the other. And so she mentioned to a family member once, she said, hey, maybe I'll be, a flight attendant because then you can travel the world. And they were like, flight attendant, why don't you be a pilot? And so there was actually there were a couple of people from the Coast Guard who were getting married on the island, and Renaqua was actually a singer, so she was singing at this wedding, and they talked to her afterwards, and they said, "Yeah, the Coast Guard, it's not just boats," because Renaqua was like, Coast Guard boats, but anyway, it's kind of a cool story. But anyway, now we get to outside Earth, we get to space. And there are 5 women in this section. There's Mae Jemison. So again, as a little girl, she watched the first, trip onto the moon, first steps onto the moon, and she was so ambitious and so curious and so, not willing to let anything stand in her way. Very, very keen on science, became a doctor before she was an astronaut. And she's also part of the 100-Year Project, which is that whole idea of getting, colonizing Mars and getting people off the planet. So it's just amazing and mind-boggling.
And let's just go back to Mae because she has her own memoir out there, which is Find Where the Wind Goes, Moments from My Life. Mm-hmm. And then tons of books about her for younger readers, like even like picture books and stuff for the little people. Yeah.
And they're lovely.
And
lovely
Ellen Ochoa has a bunch of picture books too. You're about to talk about her. So
yeah. And not to mention a school named after her, and all of these different things. Wow. Yeah, no, she's lovely too, and I was able to speak with her. She went to space 4 times. Again, she wasn't picked the first time she applied to be an astronaut, but she was eventually picked, and thank goodness, because not only did she contribute by going to space with these these science missions, but she also became the director of the Johnson Space Center, which is huge.
And we're talking about Ellen Ochoa right now. Exactly. Yeah. And the first Hispanic woman in space and the first Latina director of Johnson, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, fantastic. Samantha Cristoforetti, spent a lot of time on the International Space Station. She's again another go-getter. She's in the European Space Agency, and and she started off flying jets as well, and then kind of did and the European Space Agency doesn't have as many openings for astronauts like the U.S. one does. So she knew that as soon as they had this opening, boom, she had to go in. And out of, I forget how many there were, but it was like hundreds of applicants. And she was able to, get a spot.
She has a memoir. It's called The Diary of an Apprentice Astronaut. And then there are some books for young readers in Italian that I saw about her.
Yeah. Karen Nyberg, there's something, I just love her so much because she's such an artist. And so, in fact, that's what I named the chapter was Space Artist, because she actually brought some sewing up to space. The first time she brought it, she didn't have time. She was on a shuttle. The second time she was actually in the International Space Station, and she was able to sew a couple of projects. One was she took the material from the liner, the food liner of some of the food that was up there. And she made this little dinosaur for her son, and just, so innovative. And I just love that connection. One of the other things though about Karen Nyberg that I talk about in my book are all these like preparatory missions. So she learned to fly a jet. She did this wilderness survival, like all astronauts do. But she also participated in NEMO, which is this, I forget what the acronym is for, but basically they go underwater and they spend about a week in this facility underwater. And it really mimics the conditions of space. And so you go out and you try all these new, she had to try out this new rover that they were trying to test drive for later on for Mars. And, they had it tethered and there were issues with the tether. It was rising too much up. So they had to put little lead weights on it to, take care of the buoyancy. So all this like pre-work, and when you think of it, all this stuff that you have to do to get people get people up to space. And sometimes, I know I focus on, here's the success, here's the mission. But if you take a look behind the scenes and all the, the buoyancy lab that they have to go and try out in, all of these things that they have to do to actually get there, it's really mind-boggling.
And what, I just have to mention that I did love the story too about the quilt, which she made her own quilt square in space and invited the world to make them along with her. And what did you say? 2,400 people participated in this thing. And then they put these quilts together, several of them, obviously, with that many quilt squares that were so cool. They were all space related. So she's very creative and I love that.
Yeah. And just, and bringing people in and getting people to participate. I just think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we've got Anusa Ansari, and she actually, the chapter is called Entrepreneur in Space. So she paid for her way to get up there, but she was, she was very innovative. Again, she didn't come from a rich background or, she was actually, had a very difficult childhood. She came to the United States from Iran, and during really tough, difficult times. And she was very much an engineer. Her and her husband and also a colleague put together a company, and they really built things from scratch. She said, and again, this is just this entrepreneurial spirit of hers, because she, at one point, they were fixing up cars to sell. So they were like literally getting out there with a scrub brush, cleaning up these old cars and trying to sell them for a profit. And, so just not afraid of hard work, not afraid of doing what needed to be done. And, but when she did, she's very much into giving back and contributing. And so, the fact that she went up into space, she also is involved in SpaceX and, contributed money so that people would, enter these contests so that they could really accelerate the private space industry. And today, things are much further along than they ever have been. So again, all these people are cool, and I could speak for hours about them all, but that just gives us all a little, taste of everything.
So it's a great collection of stories, and all of them inspiring. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about writing, but there are several things that I really loved. I love the organization, loved the diversity. I loved that you brought in little bits of their childhood. Like you may open with an anecdote from their flying days or whatever, but we go back into their childhood and kind of see the breadcrumb trail to how they got from A to B. How did they get into the aircraft? And how do they pursue these dreams, which obviously is really important for young people to see what that path looks like. So you did a really good job with that. And then I also liked the call outs, which is sort of like supplemental information about a variety of topics related to their stories. So nicely done. It's a great book.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. I saw that you have an educator's guide on your website for any educators out there. And the website is AnnMcCallumBooks.com. And that you also do school visits. So tell us how that works and how can teachers book a visit with you and what can they expect?
Sure. Well, of course, COVID threw a wrench into us all. And I've basically been doing a lot of virtual visits versus in person, but I do both. I was a teacher for a long time. And so, I love getting in front of young people. And I do provide a teacher's guide. I, try to make it as interactive as possible, try to really engage kids. And, sort of the theme of my presentations is not, oh, this is only if you want to be a pilot or an astronaut. It's whatever your dream is. If it's small, it's small. If it's big, it's big. It doesn't really matter. My dream is to write books. And, I some days I look at that blank page and it's tough. But, whatever that dream is, there are ways to get there. There are steps to get there. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to inspire young people. And so, like I said, the presentations are very interactive. If people are interested in booking a presentation, I do a limited number of free just Q&As online. And also, if they want in person or they want a more extensive program, you can just go and contact me through my website, which is AnnMcCallumBooks.com, and we can chat about it.
And there you can also find all of her other books, some of which we've touched on. I noticed that this book, it looks like it's, and you mentioned earlier that it's a part of a series. It's the second in a series after Thrill Seekers about the women in extreme sports. Let's see, it's called the Women of Power series. So that's super fun. So what are you working on now and what types of topics do you plan to explore?
Well, I was really thrilled to do the Women of Power series because I thought it was so fun to connect with all these interesting people. So right now I'm actually working on something that's not human related. It is nonfiction. I don't feel like I can give away a lot of details yet because we're just in the middle of signing the contract. So but let's just say that it's not people. I do have an idea though for another Women of Power series, and I'd love to write that down the line. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I sort of have gravitated to nonfiction. I've tried some fiction, and that hasn't been as successful for me as nonfiction has been. So so in the foreseeable future, probably some more nonfiction stuff.
That's great. Well, so let's remind, before I want to shift into talking about writing and publishing because you have so much experience with it, and I know that will be useful to our writers group and to any of those people out there considering writing for young people. But before we do that, let's remind everybody where we can find you. We've mentioned the website already, and where else?
Well, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. So if you just put Ann McCallum Staats for Facebook, it's actually easiest if you just go to my website because then you can click on the social media icons. So Ann McCallum Books, again, is the website. And from there, you can get onto, like I said, Twitter. Twitter's McCallum Books, at McCallum Books, and Instagram is Ann MS Books. But anyway,
if you can go on any of those and just look your name up and you'll pop up. So that's how I found you on all of them too. And then I want to say, I just thank you so much for bringing your writing and experience and your curiosity and your passion to women in aviation. And I do hope to have some conversations with some of the subjects of your book separately and get them to talk about it and obviously promote your work as well, whether it's talking about their books or some of my, definitely want to get in touch with our girl Ronnie and my fellow Coastie and hear her story and some of these others. So thank you so much, Anne, and we'll continue this conversation about writing. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoy the books you read, I hope you'll take just a few minutes to rate and review them on Goodreads, Amazon, or wherever you buy your books. Book reviews help sell books and help the stories of women in aviation reach a broader audience. Likewise, if you enjoy the Aviatrix book review interviews, please like, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Thank you to Shasta Ways and Michael Wilds of the Women's Soar Group for their assistance in producing this interview. The Women's Soar Group is a media company that gives women a platform to express themselves. Blue skies and happy reading.
Just say